We welcome all of you on tonight, those of you by Zoom, as well as those of you who are tuning in by live stream from our church website. Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we thank you for this evening, another day that you have blessed us to see. And we thank you, O God, because you have given us another day. Thank you, O God, for the past 27 months in which you have allowed us to still fellowship, still learn by way of technology. May this night be one in which we carry something away in order to be used by us, by our family, and by our friends. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Again, we welcome all of you on tonight. I will have Dr. Johnson introduce Ms. Mitchell, but I do want to say that it was in seminary almost 30 years ago that I first met my friend Cary Johnson. He's a native of Portsmouth, Virginia. He grew up in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, founder of New Life Church in Sterling, Virginia. He attended St. Paul's College and played basketball, and the late Coach Price was his coach, a member of Fifth Baptist Church. Again, master's from Virginia Union, Doctor of Ministry degree from Wesley in Washington, D.C. His wife, Leslie, is on, and she is from the Danville, Virginia area. And we thank God for our being here on tonight together. Reverend Johnson, go right ahead.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Brown. I've spoken to Pastor Earl Brown earlier, and thank you for the invitation to share. I think this is a very timely broadcast for end-of-life care, and we're going to deal with dementia and Alzheimer's tonight. And I have my colleague and co-worker, Julie Mitchell. We've been working together, tag teaming, doing seminars for years, over 20 years. And I thank her for being a participant tonight and sharing tonight in this session as well. I'm going to share tonight on the frustrations and challenges of caregiving for those who are dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's patients. As I was listening earlier, these conversations can be very uncomfortable, upsetting to think about as we have these dialogues about individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's. So I think it is necessary and can mean proper planning ahead and can mean a better experience at the end of life. And a lot of times we don't want to talk about death, but we know that death is approaching, particularly those who are declining in health. With about 20 plus years of being a chaplain and serving those with dementia and Alzheimer's, I've listened to countless caregivers. I have discovered how at times it can be challenging, overwhelming, demanding, frustrating for those who are caring for their loved ones. First of all, frustration and anger at times are normal and valid emotional responses to many of the difficulties of caregiving. Do not think that something is wrong with you when those emotional responses occur. It is a daily part of routines of caregiving. I will oftentimes hear the caregivers pull me to the side, and when they are very frustrated with caregiving, they're asked this question: what is wrong with me? Why am I responding emotionally with anger? Why am I so frustrated? Why am I this way? And my response would be, it is a valid response to the frustrations in caregiving for Alzheimer's and dementia patients. It is not a lack of faith or not that you're not trusting in God, but this is how difficult caregiving can be. So frustration and anger are natural or normal responses to those who are dealing with the difficulties of caregiving. Secondly, I want to deal with self-care. If you're not managing your self-care, coping with these extreme frustrations and stressors, it can negatively impact your physical health or cause you to be physically or verbally aggressive towards your loved one, the one you're caring for. If your caregiving situation is causing you extreme frustration or anger, you may want to explore some new techniques for coping while caring for yourself as well. Sometimes caregivers feel guilty if they do not care for themselves. Routine physical checkups should not be ignored or neglected. Sometimes if you do not take time to care for yourself, someone will be caring for you. So again, self-care is so important. We oftentimes talk about caregiver burnout, feeling that you have no more strength to deal with caring for your loved ones. I think at that time, you need to take time for self, make time for yourself, seek out help, share your feelings with your community of faith and friends is a plus. Having someone to listen to your concerns, and community support groups are available as well for Alzheimer's and dementia patients. So it's good to care for yourself, make time for yourself, reach out to friends and let them be a sounding board for you, and reach out to community support groups in your area as well. When you are frustrated during the caregiving process, it is important to distinguish between what is and what is not within your power to change the situation. Frustration usually arises out of trying to change an uncontrollable circumstance or situation. You will face things you cannot change. And I will emphasize and reiterate uncontrollable circumstances. Normal daily activities such as dressing, bathing, eating can become frustrations for you. You may be hoping for change, but change may not occur. So I would ask the question, what are some of the behaviors that may surface during caregiving? First of all, wondering or asking repeated questions can be very frustrating. Things are different now. Mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, loved one, things are different. They are no longer the same. It's a different season. Conversations are different. Behaviors are different. The things your loved ones used to do but can't do anymore, they used to do it independently of themselves, is different now. It is important to remember that when these repeated questions may occur over and over and over again, or what I find is very frustrating for caregivers, when they no longer can call out your name. They mistake you for someone else. It is important to remember that the person with the dementia or Alzheimer's cannot control their behavior caused by this disease. They do not need to be corrected or grounded in reality. You can distract them or just agree with them as a way to reduce frustration. When I'm dealing with patients with dementia and Alzheimer's, they may repeat the same question over and over and over again. And sometimes you just have to go with it. And I always say, meet your patient or meet your loved one where they are. So again, repeated questions and wonderings can be frustrating for loved ones. In this case, use simple and direct statements and place yourself close within the proximity of the person that you're caring for. Use direct statements and place yourself in close proximity to your loved one who you are caring for with this cognitive disorder. Next, try not to argue about unimportant things, such as, do you remember this date? Do you remember this time? Your loved one just can't remember. It's a different season for them now. So again, try not to argue about unimportant things. Be present with them, and then again, meet them where they are. Next, one of the other frustrations, I was talking to a friend of mine who was dealing with the issue. Allow extra time to accomplish tasks such as dressing. Remember, people with dementia often react more to our feelings than our words. Finding ways to calm can help you gain cooperation. When you're dealing with uncontrollable circumstances, you do control one thing, and that one thing is how will I respond to this circumstance. That's the only thing you can control. How will I respond to this circumstance? Next, use calmness and clarity strategically. Use calm and clarity strategically. People with cognitive and behavioral problems are even more sensitive to caregivers' anger. Even if you have reached your limit with frustration, you say you had enough, I can't do this anymore, it is still crucial to approach care recipients with serene assurance and confidence. Your ability to remain calm with having a calming effect on them. Keep your request clear and simple. Clear and simple. When meeting resistance, proceed gingerly and try to persuade them lightly. Now, if that doesn't produce the desired cooperation, then back off for the time being before reapproaching your loved ones later when they may be more cooperative. So sometimes you just need to back, catch a breath, and to revisit them again. Next, learn your loved one's triggers and bring out their best. Learn your loved one's triggers, what triggers them, and bring out their best. People with cognitive and behavioral problems are often highly sensitive to changing in their environment, including noise and light levels, the temperature and the amount of social stimulation. They may also function better and be more cooperative at certain times of the day than at others. So you will have to gauge that. By noticing the specific conditions that affect your loved ones most, you could avoid stressing them more than necessary and thereby decrease the chances they become agitated and resistant. In other words, take the path of least resistance and make demands upon them only under optimal circumstances. So again, I just wanted to briefly share some frustrations and caregivers and some with caregiving and some things that you may need to be aware of if you are in that particular situation. And finally, I have these to conclude. Learn to recognize the warning signs and frustrations. Intervene to calm yourself down physically, step back, retreat at times, modify your thoughts in a way that reduces stress, and learn to communicate assertively at times, and learn when to ask for help. Learn when to reach out and ask for help. All of these can be valuable tools in your toolbox when you are, again, caring for those who are experiencing dementia and Alzheimer's. That concludes my session. Just wanted to, I can't give a bravo on that, but that's to share some frustrations and challenges in caregiving for those who are caring for those who have dementia and Alzheimer's. Now I want Julie Mitchell, that's to touch on some advanced directives and some financial pieces during end-of-life care as well. Julie Mitchell.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate the invitation to be able to join you all on this evening. I would like to talk about some of the financial aspects of caring for someone who has been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. So I'd like to get started with, first and foremost, a durable power of attorney. A durable power of attorney for finances is a form that can be completed with the individual, and this is at a time when the individual still is cognitively able to have the capacity to be able to make decisions for themselves in terms of, the durable power of attorney form is that individual giving someone the authority to be able to make financial decisions for them if they get to a point where they are deemed incapable or not having the capacity, the cognitive capacity to make their own decisions. So this is a form that could be filled out in advance, or for example, if someone is newly diagnosed, but still understands some of the decision making that needs to take place pertaining to their care, they can fill this out at that time. It's, again, the durable power of attorney for financial. It's a form. It's a form that could be, you can find that online, local area agency or agency offices have them. But again, this is the form that could be filled out with the individual. The individual would have to fill out that, be able to sign that form and have the capacity to be able to sign the form themselves, be at that stage of their diagnosis. Another form that can help with assisting someone who has dementia with managing their finances is called a living trust. And a living trust addresses the management of money and property while a person is still living. The trust provides instructions about that person's estate and appoints someone who is called a trustee to hold titles to property and money on the behalf of that person. A trustee can pay bills or make other financial and property decisions when the person with dementia can no longer manage his or her affairs. So this is another form or a different form that can also help with managing an individual's finances while they are diagnosed with dementia. One thing to take into, I'm going to step back for a second, of the durable power of attorney for finances, that is a form that will no longer be in effect once that individual has passed away. So the durable power of attorney for finances and the living trust are only in effect for as long as someone is living. One thing I'd also like to add to that is that the durable power of attorney for finances and the living trust should be honored by any financial institution, but sometimes there are banks that like to have their own forms on file. So you might want to look into in your that individual, you might want to check with their bank to see if they have their own forms that they want to have on file. in addition, have completed and on file in addition to either of these forms. But these two forms I've spoken of, they are supposed to be able to be used with any entity, any institution. And then the final financial form basically is having a will. And that is just as the durable power of attorney for finances and the living trust are only in effect as long as someone is alive. After that person has passed away, then the will is the form that will be that will indicate how a person's assets and how their estate will be distributed upon their death. So that's another form that someone who is early dementia, someone who has the capacity to make their own decisions, it would be very helpful if that individual could complete a will if possible. There are templates online that can be completed. Someone can fill out a will with an attorney, of course. The living trust also can be, all of these forms can be filled out with an attorney, can be completed by an attorney with assistance from an attorney, or they can be filled out as a do-it-yourself kind of forms. But those are the three primary forms to take into consideration for planning for the advanced care planning for someone who does have dementia or Alzheimer's. If an individual is at a point where they're unable to make their own decisions, and none of these forms are in place, so there is no legal form that is in place in order to have someone to be able to manage someone's financial affairs, then a legal guardianship can be requested through family court, through the local family court. You would petition, an individual could petition the court in order to be deemed the legal guardian. I mean, there's a whole process that goes along with that, but if there's someone who is in need of that oversight, there is a way that can be done, or even a court can appoint a legal guardian through the court system. So it doesn't have to be a family member or a friend or someone who's familiar with the individual, but it can be, the court could deem a court-appointed individual who does not have a familiar relationship, but still the responsibilities would still be the same, whether it's a court-appointed or whether it's someone who has requested to be the court-appointed guardian. So that would be a way of being able to assist someone who does not have these forms in place and doesn't have the capacity to be able, the cognitive capacity to be able to complete these forms. I'd also like to mention, in terms of finances, in terms of if a family member or someone is in need of financial assistance to assist with their care, there are two avenues, well, really three, I'd say, avenues that are available to assist with financially assist with helping to pay for care. And the primary form would be Medicaid. Medicaid has a program called the Personal Care Waiver Program, or another name for that would be the long-term care program through Medicaid. If someone is eligible for Medicaid services, they could be eligible for that program to assist with their care. And that is, and that level of care is either the Medicaid would pay for an aide to be able to come into the home for a particular number of hours, and that number of hours would be determined by how many hours that individual qualifies for. And there's a whole application process that goes into that in terms of what the number of hours that a person is eligible for, what that looks like, would have to be determined by the county, by Medicaid. But that is one program, that long-term care program. Also, the Personal Care Waiver Program pays for an aide to come into the house. If the average number of hours is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, could be up to 7. But again, how will those hours work out? It's based on what the individual's needs are. And then also that same program pays for a nursing home placement if someone does need that level of care where their care cannot be managed at home. Same program, but in the same criteria, same qualifications, financially, as well as the actual level of care needs. Those are two aspects of that eligibility. If that person meets both of those levels of eligibility, then that program will either pay for an aide to come to the home, or for long-term, or to go into a nursing home for care there. But to keep in mind that this program does not pay for an aide around the clock. If someone needs aid, or if someone needs hands-on assistance with care paid for by Medicaid around the clock, that would be in a nursing home. But Medicaid would pay for, like I said, an average of 8 hours a day to have someone, to have the aide come into the home to assist with care. Under the VA the Department of Veteran Affairs, if the individual is a veteran, there is a program called Aid and Attendance. It's AID and Attendance. It's a program that is, again, the veteran would have to qualify financially for that, as well as qualify based on what their care needs are. But that would be through the Department of Veterans Affairs if a veteran is eligible for that. That application is through that avenue. And then the last source of financial assistance is a long-term care insurance policy. It's kind of like, it's a policy that would be privately paid for by that individual in advance. But it's a policy that will assist with managing an individual's care needs if it gets to that point. But again, it's more of a private, it's kind of like having life insurance where you pay for life insurance. But it's actually a different kind of insurance. It's called long-term care insurance that would pay for someone's long-term care needs if they get to a point where they need assistance with their care needs. And then if you need assistance with any of this, of the things that we talked about today, you can either contact an elder law attorney who can help with completing or can help draw up any of these forms. Also, your local legal aid society could assist as well. The Alzheimer's Association, they have resources that they could help direct families and friends to for assistance. And then also the National Institute of Health, NIH, they have a department called the National Institute of Aging, NIA. They also have resources that can help with further information for any of the things that we had talked about for today. And that's it. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna have Mrs. Mitchell answer questions and then go back to Pastor Johnson. In terms of what Mrs. Mitchell just presented, if you have questions, would you please ask the questions at this time?
I have one question. Have you heard of a POD? That's something I heard about when a member passed, and it was something where you could put a person on your checking account or your banking accounts, and they would have access only upon your death. I found out that from a funeral home, and I have a POD. Have you heard of that?
I've not heard of a POD. No, I have not.
Upon a death.
Okay. But that would be something that you'd go through your individual bank to do?
Right. My daughter had to actually go in, and she only has access to it upon my death. And I found out about that from a funeral home, because a lot of times people don't have money and they need it right away and they can't get in the bank account because the durable power is over with. And that was one thing I found about when a relative passed. Okay. The funeral home advised it as something to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
We have a couple of hands raised, Ms. Alexander and Reverend Pride.
Okay, my question is there a big difference between the durable power of attorney and the living trust?
Well, I would say they're very similar. I would say they're definitely very similar. The durable power of attorney, for finances, it's supposed to be all inclusive, but the living trust you can be more detailed with the living trust, and just kind of be more specific about what aspects of the individual's management that would be addressed. So, but I think the durable power of attorney is a pretty simple and easier form, but the living trust is something that would be more, I think would be something that I would recommend going through an attorney to deal with for the living trust. But the durable power of attorney for finances is a form that can be filled out, and it could be a little bit more simpler to be able to address. So they are very similar.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Reverend Pride.
I put my hand down because it was my exact same question. So thank you for answering that. Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure. Next,
Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah, I was trying to get at the back of the line because I figured there would be a ton of questions based on the previous call we had. So there are questions on the previous call that kind of center around your assets. And I'm thinking of my father in this particular case in terms of, you know, what may qualify under Medicaid and not qualify under Medicaid. Can you speak to that at all without getting too deep? And then is there anything we should consider also regarding Medicare, or is this pretty much just a Medicaid conversation when you're talking about dealing with, again, a father who's getting up there in age?
Right. Well, this is primarily a Medicaid conversation because Medicare does not cover for long-term care assistance. Medicare will pay for a nursing home for someone to be in a nursing home, but only if they're there for skilled rehab. That's the only time Medicare will cover. So this conversation pertaining to Medicaid, in terms of assets, if the individual is going to be, like, for example, if your dad is living in his own home and you are applying for long-term care assistance for him to stay in his own home, to have an aide to come and assist him there, his home is not considered an asset as long as he's living in his home. If he goes into a nursing home, then it's considered a financial asset. If your dad has one car, that car, even if he's not driving it, if he's a registered owner of a car, then that one car is not an asset. But if he has more than one car, car number 2 and beyond is considered an asset. They will look at if he has a property, meaning does he have a boat or any farm equipment? They'll look at all of those things as an asset. But what if you're considering Medicaid as an option for your dad, you could apply and see where your dad stands. Meaning you can apply and then they can give you the feedback in terms of whether your dad would be approved or not. And if not, they would give you the reasons as to why he's not approved. Because even if your dad is approved, but you're not, because there are times when, for example, if your dad's income is over their limit for what Medicaid allows as the cutoff for the maximum amount of income, then if your dad were to be approved for long-term care services, there could be a copay that goes along with that if he's over the income allowance. So I say that all to say this: that Medicaid application can be very complicated in the sense of it's very individualized depending on what each individual situation is. If your dad has a life insurance policy over $2,000, that is also considered an asset. However, they do allow for funeral expenses to be paid in advance and not be considered an asset. So you can take that into consideration. That's something else to take into consideration when you're thinking about the possibility of applying.
I appreciate that. And what you also had shared with him being an ex-veteran to check with the VA. I think my friend Marie Gibson had mentioned that to us before, also check there. So thank you.
You're welcome. Excellent.
Good evening. I
Yeah.
was interested in what you were talking about, the will. Is it still true that a will can be contested, and if you want someone to have certain properties, you should have it deeded to them?
Um, I'd like to defer because in terms of the details of the legality of a will, I would like to defer not to answer too specific a answer such as that.
Mhm.
In general, I would, and so I would really, I prefer to defer to someone who is an attorney who's more in that area of practice. But I would say in general, to be as the best way to protect assets would be to ensure that that will is in place, notarized by someone, by a notary, so that it is clear that that individual, how they wrote up their will is the way that they wanted it written to try to protect. Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
I
Alex.
think, yeah,
Yes.
Alexander and Thad and Pat.
Okay, the financial assistance through the Veterans Administration, is that just for veterans only, or is the spouse able to get assistance?
And I don't want to mislead you. I have heard that a spouse can receive, but I would defer to the VA department, the Department of Veteran Affairs, to be more specific, because I don't want to misdirect you. I think the spouse is eligible as well, but I would definitely check in with them on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Thad and Pat?
Hey, Ms. Mitchell, I hope you're doing well. As far as a living trust, if the husband and wife are still living, and when one dies for the other, I guess that person becomes the trustee. I guess my question is, if the person that's left behind, that person having challenges, so would the bank or whatever other institution, would they now become the trustee?
I'm saying, I'm sorry. So if your question is if the husband and wife both have a trustee or have a living trust?
Yeah, living trust, and I died. I'm gone, and my wife is still living, but now she becomes incapacitated to the point of that she's going to need a trustee. So who's in a position to appoint that person if the other party is somewhat incapacitated?
So if both of you have a trust, if both of you have a trustee listed in your living trust,
Yes.
then that would be, so your wife would have her trustee, you would have yours. If you are your wife's trustee and vice versa, then you might want to then determine, well, if either of you are unable to fulfill that capacity, then who would be the secondary individual?
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And my lead-in question, banks, are all banks capable of administering a living trust? Example, if I may, there's a bank in Blackstone, it's Citizen Bank and Trust. So that's telling me trust that that bank may be able to manage a living trust.
They would have to be deemed, you and your wife would have to determine who you would want to be. You are appointing, both of you are appointing who your trustee is. So if you want the bank to be your trustee, then that is something that you would want to look into when you're drawing up that living trust.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Ms. Mitchell, there's a question. Can a family member qualify to care for a loved one in home?
And I'm thinking through the personal care waiver program through Medicaid, they can.
That's what it probably is, Julie.
Right. Yes, they can, but it depends on the relationship, and it depends on whether they live in the home with that individual or not. My understanding is that, for example, if it is let's say it's a mom who's living in the home with her daughter, my understanding is that that daughter would not be able to qualify. But let's say there's a granddaughter who lives across town. She doesn't live in the home, but she's still a family member. That is called a consumer-directed waiver service under Medicaid. So it's the same program. And just to put it out there, Medicaid has a lot of programs with a lot of different names. But under that personal care waiver, the home-based care program, it's a CDED waiver. It's called a consumer-directed. I'm drawing a blank on the E, but it's a CDED waiver, consumer-directed something directed waiver. I have to look that up for you. I can look that up and I can put that in the chat for you. So yes, if it's a family member or even if it's a friend, someone familiar with the individual, they can be hired through Medicaid, under the Medicaid program, to care for someone that they are familiar with under the I want to say EDCD waiver, but I'll get that information for you. But yes, thank you very much for bringing that up, for asking that question.
Yeah, that's to piggyback off what you said, Julie. In a personal situation, my mother-in-law passed and her son lived maybe about 30 miles away. And he qualified as a caregiver for her in the home at that particular time. So you can do that, but like you say, they can't be living in the home, right?
Right.
Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to go back to, I took some notes. You spoke of an elder lawyer,
Elder
attorney,
care lawyer.
ELDER.
Mhm.
Okay, I just never heard of that type of lawyer before. Okay. All
Elder
right.
care attorney. Elder care attorney, yes.
Okay. Elder care. Are there any questions for Reverend Johnson, who began, those of you who were there from the beginning of his presentation to the end of his presentation? Any questions for Reverend Johnson? I already asked him for the manuscript for what he presented, especially when he spoke of meeting your loved ones where they are.
Mhm.
If there are any questions, please direct them to Reverend Johnson at this time.
Reverend Johnson, were there specific organizational websites that you would recommend to your talking points that you were referencing?
You could look at the dementia, Alzheimer's websites. I don't have anyone particular, but this based on particular, that's experience, listening to caregivers, and what their needs are and their frustrations over 20 plus years. I just jotted down some things that they allowed me to be a part of and listen to in caring for their loved ones. So I just dealt with the frustrations and angers at times of this day-to-day caregiving for Alzheimer's and dementia patients.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Johnson,
Yes.
can you explain the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? I know there's something alike, but can you kind of break that down?
Well,
Dementia.
Julie can touch on this if you want to, but they're kind of in the same family. With I think a doctor, physician would be more capable of answering that. But they're in that type of same family, dementia, Alzheimer's. I don't know the difference. I think Alzheimer's may be more advanced than dementia, but I think a physician would be more qualified to share the difference between the two.
Okay.
If Julie has some information, she can share it this time.
I do. One of the things that we think about dementia as the umbrella for different types of dementia. And Alzheimer's is one type of dementia. So Alzheimer's kind of fits under that umbrella of dementia. For example, there's vascular dementia, there's vascular, there's frontal lobe, there's, I'm sorry, on the spot, I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. But there's I want to say at least about 5 or 6, maybe somewhere around there, 5 or 6 dementias, different types of dementia, meaning the cause of the dementia is for different reasons. There's different reasons for that, and that's why there are different names for that.
And
So-
the different and the different stages as well, right, Julie? Being more advanced as well with different stages of the dementia and Alzheimer's, right?
Well, yes, there's different stages within each dementia, but Alzheimer's is its own category of dementia, meaning
Right.
the cause of the reason for the Alzheimer's. It's more of a brain issue. Is the reason for Alzheimer's as Alzheimer's, as opposed to, for example, vascular dementia is a dementia that is more vascular. Like if there's a loss of blood supply in the brain, then that would be called a vascular dementia. I can also try to put those different ones in the chart. I mean, in the chat as well. But yeah, so just think of dementia as the umbrella, and then there are different types of dementia under that umbrella. But Alzheimer's is one of those types of dementia.
Yes, and somebody mentioned Parkinson's, Lewy body,
Yes,
Alzheimer's, and also ALS. That's another one. That's probably with Lewy bodies or whatever.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any more questions for Pastor Johnson?
Yes, sir, Pastor Brown. You know, there's not a week that doesn't go by that we pick up the newspaper and now this cognitive issue of Alzheimer's dementia is very prevalent now. So I will hope that that our church will consider, and not to overtax the Zoom ministry, but this is something that is much needed. And we're very grateful for Dr. Johnson and Mr. this evening, and so as the Brunson week before last. So, you know, I would like to see us to have this type of setting form at least once a month. Again, we don't want to overtax the Zoom ministry. Perhaps the subject matter expert that's before us tonight, they can host it. You know, just let us know we're going to offer this support group for dementia / Alzheimer, such and such a date. So, so thank you all very much. It was it's a lot of great information, and my wife and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Pastor Brown.
Any other questions for Ms. Mitchell or Pastor Johnson on this evening? And go ahead, Angie.
Thank you, Reverend Ricardo. Good afternoon, Reverend Johnson and Ms. Mitchell. Just a quick question. So much to delve into. Certainly, I know we can't cover it all tonight because, you know, this is a very broad topic. But I did want to ask if there was any conversation about probate and the review of insurance policies on a regular basis. A lot of our community took out those policies with Home Beneficial, American General, and they're very old. And a lot of our parents have them still stored in drawers, and people don't even know that they may or may not be worth anything. So is there any review or conversation around those two things? Either one of you is fine.
I'm sorry, your question is about life insurance policies?
One is about the life insurance policies that many of our parents, grandparents took out with Home Beneficial, Citizen Home Insurance, all these old policies that people have stored away, and they think that when their loved one needs them or is incapacitated or pass away, that they're useful, and often find out that they're not. So is there any indication about reviewing those things on a regular basis? And then the second question is about probate. What happens when you don't have a will and you don't make your wishes known?
Right, okay. The first question, the answer to the first question is my recommendation would be to consider reaching out to the life insurance company even ahead of time, just to kind of see where things stand, just to kind of be prepared. And then that way, because also the question would be, is there enough are there enough, is there enough coverage in the policy to be able to cover expenses? And if not, then thinking about, well, how will that be taken care of when that time comes? So I would recommend reaching out to the insurance companies and just being able to obtain the information that you would need to know, to have updated information from them. I would highly recommend that. And your second question, if someone does not have a will, then basically everything stops and nothing really can be done in terms of their assets. And so the recommendation is to reach out to the circuit court clerk of the county in which that individual lived. And what happens is someone can, let's say, for example, if it's a family member, someone can reach out to the circuit court clerk and apply to become the administrator of that individual's estate. And the question would be, are there other, for example, let's say if it's a mom who has passed away and she has children, if one of the children would like to apply to become the administrator, then as long as the other two are in agreement, then that can be approved. But in terms of what happens in that situation, the circuit court of the county can be very helpful to be able to give you all the details as to what that would look like. I know we live in Loudoun County, so and I've worked with the circuit court clerk under those circumstances, and there's a wealth of information to be able to share with you. So that would be your first step, would be to reach out to the circuit court clerk of your county.
Mm-hmm. And also I would say, and you can pick it back after this, Julie, how they need to revisit what funeral home that they have this policy connected to reach out to them as well. Because sometimes it's way back, they did it back in the 70s or whatever. You need to revisit those funeral homes as well. Okay. and see what's going on with that as well. Does it need to be updated? Is it enough coverage? So again, that can be beneficial as well.
Right, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you both.
Right. And I know I just wanted to mention something. I'm not sure if you all are aware that Social Security also does have what they call a death benefit, but the death benefit is $250 and it's only available to the surviving spouse. There's some individuals who are surprised that it's not available to, let's say, an adult child who's caring for their parent, but it's only available for that one time, and it's only for the surviving spouse.
Dr. Johnson, I have one alibi question, if I may. Do you recommend that if it's affordable that we should attempt to pay for our funeral expenses while we're still living?
I think it's based on the case. It's case by case. I think it's individualized, depending on what your financial status is. That's what you would do. I think it's personal. It would be if you have the finance, it would be good to pay it up front. But if not, you make them pay in increments or whatever. Have a plan with your funeral home as to how you're going to plan out making the payments as well. But I think it's a case by case based on finance or whatever. But if you can, I would encourage you to do that as well.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 5 minutes until 8. Didi, go ahead, Didi. Or did you accidentally put your hand up, Didi? Didi Mitchell?
I think she's muted.
I'm on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I was on mute. I'm sorry. But very quickly, Reverend Johnson, to the FAD, you just asked about paying ahead, or putting money aside. Reverend Johnson, wouldn't in a life insurance policy or so forth suffice? I mean, too, and I'm speaking to my experience with my mom and my sister and so forth, but there were life insurance policies that they had that took care of all of the funeral expenses. So certainly you can pay ahead of whatever, but if your relative has an insurance policy, then normally, the funeral homes, you present that and, they take, the funeral expenses out of the life insurance policy.
Yes,
Before.
and I agree with that. And I think, like someone mentioned earlier about there may be some old policies out there. And I think you need to revisit it, make sure that the coverage is up to date, that, so you won't be caught by surprise when it's time to pay the bill. So again, you need to revisit it and this from time to time and make sure that the insurance policy will cover the cost of the funeral as well. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I know someone had mentioned to me, if you don't prepay, it's important to at least have the pre-plan discussion.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is helping me in terms of the conversations I had with my dad, so that, I kind of have an idea of what he would like to have done.
Sure. Good point.
Right. That's right.
Is there anyone else on tonight with a question? I thank you all for this discussion. Anyone else? Thank you, Fifth Baptist family and friends, for another Zoom. And I pray that you gain much from it. I know that I did, as with all of them. And you may unmute and we will see you later.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell.
All
Great
right,
discussion.
Thank
Have
you
a
for
good
allowing
evening.
thank you for allowing me to share.
Thanks to
Thank you
all of
very much for all of the information.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson and Mrs.
All
Mitchell.
right.
And for the good questions that were asked, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much. We appreciate you.
All right.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you both very much. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all both for that very, very insightful discussion. And hopefully it won't be our last. There will be another one scheduled to continue the dialogue about the conversation we really need to have. So thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
The hard step is bringing our loved ones into the conversation. Our kids.
Yes, in our case.
Ms. Mitchell, thank you so much. Good to meet you by way of Zoom.
You're quite welcome. It was a pleasure to be here this evening. I appreciate it. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Good night.